The warning is coming very soon. Don't believe CNN when afterwards they try to dismiss it with this argument. Today, brothers and sisters, we would like to share with you an article written by Dr. Daniel O'Connor on his blog dated December 6, 2021. The warning is coming very soon. Just today, we saw an announcement regarding the single most significant sign of its imminence, the sign that warning watchers have for decades been keeping an eye out for. The Pope just announced his willingness to go to Moscow. Before saying anything else, let me issue my usual exhortation. Do you want to be as ready as possible for the warning? Then live in the divine will. Knowing about the warning is much less important than being ready for it. Now, this announcement of the trip isn't merely an expression of willingness. According to Reuters, Pope Francis also said, quote, "A top Russian Orthodox official was expected in Rome next week to decide the time and location of the meeting," end quote. So this will likely happen quite soon, extraordinary as it would be. No pope has ever visited Russia, much less Moscow. This is a huge sign of the imminence of the warning, since the garabandal visionary Conchita said, quote, "The Pope will go to Russia, to Moscow. As soon as he returns to the Vatican, the hostilities, which will immediately precede the warning, will break out in different parts of Europe," end quote. Now, the other big sign of the imminence of the warning is, quote, "communism coming again," end quote, which Conchita also said indicates when the warning will be. That, of course, is exactly what has happened in the last 2 years with the world's response to coronavirus. So a papal trip to Moscow is really all that remains, and that is evidently about to happen. When the warning does come, we can rest assured that most of our overlords who run the mainstream narrative will hasten to immediately thereafter attempt to explain it away with an avalanche of pseudoscience. As I feel fairly confident about at least one type of argument they might use, I'd like to refute it here and now before they even proffer it, in hopes that if and when they do, people will remember this post. This post has been on my to-write list for many years. I even began writing it several years ago. But I'm quite glad I procrastinated, as the fact that I am publishing it now so very near to the occurrence of the warning will help it stay fresh in people's memory once the great event transpires. So it is my hope that this post will spread far and wide. The more people who hear the refutation now before the warning, the better. For when a certain bad argument is refuted before it is even made, it is much less likely to gain a foothold than if it is only refuted afterwards. The warning, we know from a number of prophecies, will be accompanied by some sort of celestial phenomena. Perhaps it's even what is described in St. Faustina's diary, wherein she describes the cross being visible in the sky, with beams of light emanating from the nail holes. Or perhaps it will be more like what the garabandal visionaries described, something, quote, "like two stars colliding," end quote. Whatever it is, it may be precisely this phenomena that will be leveraged by the secularists after the warning to explain it away. An aside. Some may then wonder, why would God allow such a phenomena if the worldly will simply use it to try to explain away the warning? The answer is that, so long as we are on this side of the grave, our free will is so very respected by God that there will never be so many doors closed to the incredulity of the scoffers that it will ever be impossible for them to conjure up a reason to deny Christ's intervention in the world. And by scoffers, I am not merely referring to the secularists. I'm also referring to those professional Catholics who now ridicule the warning before its occurrence. For many of them will do the exact same thing even after it. Habits die hard. As Jesus said in the Gospel, quote, "To you has been given the secret of the kingdom of God, but for those outside everything is in parables, so that they may indeed see but not perceive, and may indeed hear but not understand, lest they should turn again and be forgiven." Mark 4, verses 11 and 12. Difficult as it is for some to hear that, those are Christ's words, not mine. It would not be challenging for God to utterly and immediately prove himself and his interventions to every soul alive. He does not do so for a reason. Because by doing so, all merit in faith is removed. And the very purpose of this life, which is to merit for heaven by faith, is therefore thwarted. Even the warning, the greatest act of mercy in history, will come with a way out for those who are so stubborn in their self-wills that even after its occurrence, they will only want to find a rationalization to remain mired in their favorite sins and errors. Therefore, as extraordinary as the warning will be, we should not expect the various phenomena associated with it to do all the work for us in convincing the world of its authenticity. Remember that, even with the warning, most people will sadly apostatize once the Antichrist makes his entrance shortly after. So we will have much work to do to strive to minimize as much as possible the ranks of those who will join the man of sin. Above all, we must evangelize like never before, even now, before the warning, to as much as possible prepare people for it. And we must be ready to evangelize like never before in history, in the weeks following the warning. But we should also have answers to those who will try to explain away the warning. Here's the gist of what we'll likely hear from the mainstream narrative in the days following the warning. Obviously, I have no crystal ball, so I'm speculating on these details. You won't hear exactly this, but you'll likely hear fundamentally similar things. If not from Degrassi Tyson, then from someone like him. In case anyone is just skimming, I better put this in bold red type. The article below is not real. A CNN article might read like this. What was that strange phenomenon we all felt last week? CNN interviewed astrophysicist Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson to find out. We all felt it. Last Friday, it seemed like time stood still. Our hearts were beating like never before. We experienced types of pain we didn't know existed, and memories we didn't know were still in our minds were suddenly brought to the fore. Most people have even reported overwhelming feelings of guilt, though mixed with a strange sort of peace when they contemplated changing their ways, and even their lives flashing before their eyes. We can't deny it, so what should we make of it? Did we all go suddenly changing our lives on account of an odd event and an onrush of feelings that everyone experienced at the same time? Or is there a more reasonable and science-based understanding of this phenomenon? CNN sat down with world-renowned astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson to find out more. CNN: Thank you for taking the time to answer our questions, Dr. Tyson. They are, after all, the same questions people all around the world are asking right now. Dr. Tyson: My pleasure. CNN: So let me just put it to you point blank and let you go at it. What on earth happened and what should we make of it? Dr. Tyson: Thanks. What happened last week, like all things, was a material phenomenon. Thanks to modern science, we understand exactly what that phenomenon was, and a good dose of physics and biology can put all our minds at ease and allow us to get on with our lives. With everything going on in the world right now, the last thing we need is to be burdened with guilt or superstition. As most people saw with their own eyes, there was quite an astronomical event happening immediately before the phenomenon in question. Although we're still studying the details, it appears this was the result of a black hole devouring a star in a nearby galaxy that we hadn't even known about the existence of. This caused an explosive release of a very rare type of ultra-high energy cosmic ray close to the 1020 eV range. We've never experienced these before on Earth, so we have never known exactly what the impact would be on biological organisms like humans. Now, of course, we do. I've been in touch with a number of neuroscientists who are also studying what happened, and they have concluded that the energy level of these waves caused them to especially interact with the anterior cingulate cortex of the brain. Guess what that part of the brain is especially associated with? Guilt and shame. No mystery there, just science. Compounding the phenomenon was the fact that these rays seemed to not interact with the amygdala of the brain, which would have worked to counteract the guilt. The overall result was perfectly scientifically predictable. Overwhelming senses of guilt and shame felt by everyone across the Earth at the same moment, since these cosmic rays hit everyone at the same time, with no other emotions or counterbalancing thoughts to allow for a reasonable assessment. Naturally, the types of memories that people have that are especially associated with these emotions were also triggered, so people tended to associate certain things they had done with their lives with these emotions. This is, of course, just the classic case of Pavlov's dogs. Another effect of this unprecedented influx of cosmic rays was that it triggered the release of cortisol. As we know, this hormone is associated with both memories and with, you guessed it, feelings of shame and guilt. This also happened due to these unique high-energy rays and the effect that they had on the pituitary and adrenal glands. In sum, considering what the cosmic rays released by the black hole event did simultaneously to everyone's brain and endocrine glands, we know exactly what happened last week. It was an extraordinary event, yes, but it had nothing to do with a god or with Christianity, and surely it is nothing to lose sleep over. We can all get on with our lives, and really, we must get on with our lives. Think of it this way. Suppose you drank far too much one night and in your stupor had all sorts of horrible thoughts come to your head. You even made a bunch of resolutions on what you needed to do with your life moving forward. Then you wake up the next day all sobered up, though with quite a headache. How do you regard the night before? The answer is clear. You dismiss it entirely. Those drunken thoughts are not to be taken seriously when you are sober. It's the same way with what happened last week. We were all drunk for 15 minutes there. Now we're sober. Time to forget it all. CNN. Wow, that sure is reassuring. Thank you again for your time, and I know that all our readers will be relieved to hear what you have to say. So there's the gist of one method they might use to explain away the warning. Please stay tuned for our next video, in which Dr. Daniel O'Connor will refute this theory. God bless you.